Hi everyone, and welcome to my presentation for the LitMod LM8901 class. My name is Alina Khawaja, and my presentation is titled, Is Wattpad Ruining the Sanctity of Serious Fiction? How Social Media-Based Publishing Websites Threaten the Traditional Publishing Industry. In this presentation, I will be using George Gissing's new Grub Street as a lens to look at how serious fiction in our contemporary time is threatened by the rise of social media-based publishing websites. I define serious fiction as an ideological culture that utilizes gatekeepers like traditional publishers, festivals, awards, and booksellers. Fiction is protected by these gatekeepers. Books that are published go through many different people who judge its form and content. If the book's quality is deemed good, then it is permitted to be sent out to the public and the author gets to reap the benefits. However, traditional publishing is a long and tedious process. Putting aside the possible years you spend trying to gain an agent and then trying to gain a book deal, an average of 2 years can pass between acquisition and the actual publishing of the book. This is where the novelty of online publishing comes in. In a time where technology has rapidly grown in the past 20 years, people have developed new methods of publishing in digital spaces. One such space is Wattpad, a social media-based website where authors can upload their own original stories and interact directly with readers. Gone are the requirements you must fulfill. You do not need a literary agent, an editor, or a publishing house to get your stories out there. The writers in Wattpad are not restricted to what content they can write, so a reader can potentially find anything that suits their taste, and the writing is commercial, making it easily accessible. It is unlike how the serious fiction industry can often operate, favoring literary writing. In this presentation, I will argue that the emergence of new readerships, both in the 19th century and our own contemporary time, created a threat to the dominant form of publishing in each era, where one-volume novels and, quote, trashy, unquote, entertainment-focused newspapers threatened the 3-volume novel and the genre of realism in the Victorian era. Social media sharing websites like Wattpad threatens the necessity of serious fiction in our contemporary time. With this presentation, I hope to draw from New Grub Street and its place in history in order to interrogate how the serious fiction industry treats new advances when it comes to the publishing industry in response to its readership, as an industry known for its tendency to remain within the comfort of what is tried and true and familiar in our contemporary time. Placing New Grub Street in its historical context. According to the English Common Reader by Richard D. Altick, people who taught themselves how to read were a, quote, product of the age, end quote. The 1870 Education Act brought literacy to these people, which, in Gissing's eyes, was what caused the demand for, quote, trashy journalism and sensational fiction, end quote. The rise of the working class and middle class literacy in the late 19th century created a crisis for realist fiction, along with the format it took, the 3-volume novel. The goal of realist fiction and the 3-volume novel was edification, to educate readers about human nature and social problems and hopefully get them to improve themselves morally or intellectually. Because of the disinterest by the working class in edification, they turned to escapist texts, works that would entertain them instead of teach them about morals. This then has a profound effect on realist writers who suddenly found themselves without an audience to write for. Now, what is Wattpad? And as you can see, I've included a meme of Simu Liu from the Shang-Chi movies with the caption, "Me and my friends waiting for our favorite Wattpad author to upload the latest chapter of their book." It's a process I will explain later. But according to their website, they are, quote, the world's most loved social storytelling platform that collects a global community of 90 million readers and writers through the power of story, end quote. Now, for some, the term Wattpad is synonymous with trashy fiction that is riddled with cliches, bad grammar, shaky plots, and poor characterization. However, Wattpad is a much bigger force to be reckoned with and is a lot more than just an online website where amateur writers can post their stories for readers searching for more than what serious publishing can offer. Founded in 2006, Wattpad now boasts an incredibly impressive readership of the aforementioned 90 million people, as well as their own awards, the Watties, their own publishing imprint, Wattpad Books, and their own production company, Wattpad Studios. It is slowly starting to emulate serious fiction, but a majority of their focus remains on the website and the app. Wattpad is social in the sense that readers and authors can directly interact with each other. Social media has made it easier for readers to interact with authors of serious fiction, but it's not on the same level as Wattpad. Replies to tweets can get lost in an author's notifications on Twitter or on DMs on Instagram, but the function for readers to leave comments on chapters stays in the same place on Wattpad, giving authors a better chance to see what their readers think of their works directly. Wattpad thus fosters a more social environment in that sense. Serious versus social writers. In this section, I'm going to examine Reardon's career as a serious fiction writer and the careers of contemporary serious fiction writers, as well as consider the difficulties they both face in the form of trashy and sensationalist fiction. Reardon's been described as a misplaced scholar. As someone whose talents lie in essay writing, it makes sense why he has a hard time writing fiction. He already struggles with trying to reach a general audience, with the narrator clarifying that, quote, he could never appeal to the multitude, end quote. As a result of his moderate talent and small readership, it makes sense that he struggles to gain popularity within an audience of readers who are already so scarce. In Joshua Taft's essay titled The New Grub Street and the Survival of Realism, he argues that, quote, Reardon only writes interesting enough content for a small group of people instead of the masses, but it's enough to give him a successful career, end quote. In other words, Reardon's cultivated a small but dedicated fan base with his work, which is enough to sustain his career. Wattpad as the new Chit Chat. As you can see, I've included another meme, if anybody remembers the Fiji water girl at the Golden Globe Awards. So it's George Gissing enjoying realism's dominance in the Victorian era, and then behind this actress or this celebrity is the Fiji water girl just, you know, waiting in the background, stealing the show with the title, The Working Class and Their Taste for Trashy Fiction Rising. So Reardon's opposition comes in the form of new journalistic genres, such as Whelpdale's newspaper Chit Chat, described as being written for the, quote, quarter educated, end quote, or, quote, the great new generation that is being turned out by the board schools, the young men and women who can just read but are incapable of sustained attention, end quote. They are people who want, quote, bits of stories, bits of description, bits of scandal, end quote. In other words, Whelpdale has recognized a gap in the industry for this new emerging readership who are interested in a genre that is easily consumable while at the same time entertaining. One could argue that serious fiction writers in our contemporary time experience the same thing, with their opposition being Wattpad writers. Most of the time, authors of serious fiction have to cultivate a dedicated readership. If their books do not sell well, then the publishers cannot justify continuing to invest in the author's career by buying more books from them. As a result, the author cannot continue to make a sustained living. However, due to the traditional publishing industry's reluctance to invest in diverse literatures, they lose an entire demographic to online publishing where readers can find works more suited to entertaining them. This is where Wattpad becomes the trashy fiction that fills the gap in contemporary readership. Wattpad fosters an environment where any genre niche can be filled. In fact, if one goes on the Wattpad website and clicks browse, you have the standard genres that are typical of serious fiction, such as adventure and fantasy and historical fiction, but they also have categories for diverse lit, LGBTQ, and even a whole category for werewolf. The existence of such genres demonstrates the desire for such fiction not found elsewhere as often. Though niche, people on Wattpad can also cultivate a small but loyal fan base of readers who desire to read online what they fail to find on shelves and which are entertaining and easily consumable. One of the biggest differences between the two is the level of difficulty when it comes to readers gaining access to their works. As seen by Reardon's inability to find a publisher who finds monetary value in his works due to the fact that Reardon's work is not going to appeal to many people, publishers have direct control over how many people his work reaches and, as a result, how much money he makes. With social media sharing sites like Wattpad, there are no such gatekeepers, so writers can post what they want without having to bypass someone. In addition, due to access to the website being free, readers do not have to pay for their books, with the exception of those that are part of the paid stories category, which I will go into later. The threat that Wattpad in this case poses to serious fiction is that where Reardon represents the struggle of writers to create content that appeals to the masses as opposed to a small yet dedicated group of readers, which may not constitute enough sales to keep a career afloat, Wattpad writers do not have to deal with the gatekeeping typical of the industry. In that sense, Reardon's experiences show that serious writers are at the risk of losing readers who find they can fulfill their taste with an alternative option that will appeal more to what they want. Making a living from writing in the Victorian era and in the present. As we know, in the Victorian era, the main format the books were published in was the 3-volume novel. Realist fiction, one of the dominating genres, was suited well for the 3-volume format, considering that demands for volume 2 and volume 3 hinged on the popularity of the first volume, and realist fiction utilized conventions such as, quote, pathetic seductions, villainous fathers, suffering mothers, end quote, and, quote, misunderstandings all around, end quote, that would cause, quote, tears from the common reader, end quote, according to the English reader, in order to guarantee continued readership. As seen in New Grub Street, Reardon has, in the past, sold a 3-volume novel for, quote, £25, end quote. This is indicative of the worth the publishers assumed his novel had. He was also promised, quote, half of the profits after deduction of the sum advanced, end quote, though there was no, quote, pecuniary success, end quote. How that worked was that the author and publisher would evenly split the profits from the novel between each other, but only after the publisher had earned back the amount they had spent on producing the book. This obviously would hurt the author, who was trying to earn a living. On top of that, according to the English Reader, new books started to become expensive due to the, quote, traditional conservatism of the publishing trade, end quote, being, quote, intensified by the financial uncertainties of the war and the post-war era, end quote. So people who are in the working class cannot afford to buy expensive novels that do not hold their interest. It would make sense for them to turn to works that entertain them, because then at least they will find enjoyment in works that is cheap and within their budget. If we compare this situation to how publishing operates in the present, traditionally published authors are giving an advance upon selling their book. The amount is divided and distributed in installments, with the average now being given in fourths. The first is given upon signing the contract, the second upon handing in the book, the third upon actual publication, and then the final comes with the paperback version of the book's release, often a year after the original publication. Doled out over 2 years, this method of paying advances makes it difficult for authors to maintain a sustained living on writing books, especially because depending on how well the publisher thinks your book will do, the writer is at the risk of either getting a small advance or at risk of not earning royalties at all. Now, the system on Wattpad is different. For the most part, authors upload their stories onto the website for free. They write not with the worry of how much they will make off of the book, but simply out of the joy of sharing their stories with people. Readers, in turn, gain access to the books for free. This is a danger to serious fiction writers because now readers can find books that they enjoy without having to pay anything. Without a demand for traditional writers, authors stand to lose income, which in turn means that serious fiction begins to lose its importance. Wattpad authors also release their books in serializations, updating chapter by chapter as opposed to releasing the book all at once, which guarantees continued reader engagement as a result, which in turn is benefited from the new Wattpad feature called Wattpad Pay Stories that allows these authors to capitalize off of their work. The way it works is that readers buy coins on the website, which they then can use to select packages, which dictates how much access they have to certain stories based on their length and the status of the book in terms of how many chapters have been uploaded. Readers can then decide how they want to use their coins. They either pay one chapter at a time or pay for the whole book all at once. In this way, Wattpad writers can potentially make more money than traditional writers because depending on how many chapters they plan to include in the story or how short the chapters are, the author can make a decent amount of money off of their books. And then if the author wishes to make even more money off of their books, they can move into self-publishing, which is a bit different from the online publishing model. But in this context, the online writers can gain more from self-publishing. According to the Financial Express's article titled Turning the Page, How Online Self-Publishing Platforms Have Transformed the Literary Landscape, quote, indie authors who sell directly to readers, having garnered a readership on online self-publishing platforms, take home up to 96% of the value of the book, end quote, as opposed to trade published authors who, quote, earn 7.5% of their book's cover price, with those with agents losing a further 15%, end quote. This is a stark contrast to those who try to make a living from serious fiction. Thus, the business side of serious fiction is threatened by those who publish on social media-based sharing sites and those who make the move from online to self-publishing ventures, which is often done through conglomerates like Amazon. These authors also benefit from their built-in fan base they cultivated online. The dedication of fans should not be underestimated. Loyal fans will follow their favorite authors, emphasizing the importance of creating such a readership. So, should authors gravitate towards the industry of serious fiction, where they face barriers such as gatekeepers, as well as a prolonged process between writing and actual publication? Or should authors move towards the easily accessed realm of online publishing, where the publishing process, for the most part, is under their control and the gratification is instant? I suppose it all comes down to what a person wants out of their career. In this sense, it's a threat to the serious fiction industry because now there is a choice. Before the creation of online writer websites such as Wattpad, the only way for a person to get their writing out there was to either self-publish or to have it critiqued by literary agents and editors and other people involved in the publishing process if they wish to do so through serious publishing industry. They were the ones who determined the value of the author's work and if it was even worth being published. With websites like Wattpad, the only person who determines the worth of their writing is the author, which can arguably be more important. If the writer feels defeated and uninterested in their work, it is reflected in their writing, as evidenced by Bearden from New Grub Street. This new age of readers who demand more from their novels than just the same representation and content will go elsewhere to find what they want to read. Wattpad moves away from the trashy reputation it once had to being a more respected and serious contender in the world of fiction, whether it be through their online endeavors or moving towards more traditional platforms such as publishing houses in the form of aforementioned Wattpad books, while the serious publishing industry is much slower to accommodate the desires of the increasingly diverse readership. Those who write what they are comfortable with and who fear change will be the ones inevitably left behind, while their competitors end up mile ahead of them when it comes to advancements in their shared industry, whether it be the rising readership in the Victorian era, as seen in Grub Street, who lost interest in realist fiction and wanted to be entertained more than taught, or a contemporary readership who are losing interest in the rigid conventions of the novel they are offered and want to experience more than what traditional publishing offers them without having to pay. It is clear that as long as such online websites like Wattpad exist, the serious fiction industry will always be threatened by competition who are more willing to be innovative and embrace change. Thank you for watching my presentation.